This project all began when I went to see a talk by Kitty Calhoun on first ascents, mountains being climbed for the first time which could not be repeated because of climate change. The amount of ice and quality of ice just was not there. After this talk, I was curious if climate change was a universally recognized phenomenon with other climbers. Had they noticed climate change in their experiences in the outdoors? And if yes, how had they responded to it? I realized I was searching for more personal accounts of climate change through climbers, rather than the usual scientific view we see. I was already headed to Ouray, Colorado for the annual Ouray Ice Festival, which draws professional climbers from around the world, so I jumped on the opportunity to pursue these personal stories. I approached people while climbing and met some wonderful characters, and I got to meet some of my biggest idols that were just out enjoying the beautiful weather like everyone else. This project became a way to share the voices of climbers and the effects of climate change on the sport and lifestyle they love.
My name's Kitty Calhoun.
Hi, I'm Trevor Kreznar.
John Campbell.
Hey, my name is Adam Butterfield.
My name is Glanc.
I'm Justin Merle.
My name is Elaina Arenz.
My name is Jack Tackle.
Kevin Donovan.
My name's Dale Remsberg.
I'm Alexander Bianchi.
I'm Ben Healey.
My favorite thing about ice climbing is just the whole concept of being able to climb frozen waterfalls. I think it's pretty out there, you know.
I like being outside in the outdoors, and I like the athletic pursuit of climbing and the venue that I get to do it in.
There's so many good things about ice climbing, but yeah, I can't choose just one.
I love climbing. It's a lifestyle for me. And it's never something that I was like, oh yeah, I want to grow up and be a climbing guide when I grow up. It just kind of happened.
I mean, for me, it's a pretty fun job to be able to be outside and work with people, and like, you know, even if it's the 150th time I've climbed Mount Rainier, it's pretty nice to be like walking uphill and in the sun and like hanging out with people on their vacation and giving them the experience of a lifetime.
Basically, the first day I went climbing, I knew that I was going to make a living doing it. I didn't know how, I just knew that I was going to figure it out somehow.
I got into the outdoor profession sort of by accident. The more I was climbing, the less I wanted to do anything else, and the more I climbed, the more I would say, man, if somebody would just pay me to do this full time, I would do this full time. And without looking where I was going, one decision led to the other, and I kept following one job offer after another job offer in the outdoor industry, mostly in guiding, rock guiding and ice guiding. And the more I did it, the more I loved it, and now next thing I know, this is what I do for a living. So that's how it happened, by accident.
I knew I wanted to be a guide since I was like 13.
Mm-hmm.
I went out with a mountain guide when I was young, and I did a huge route up in Maine, and that kind of changed my life. And I knew from then that all I wanted to do was be in the mountains and take people out and kind of share the love and the joy of the mountain experience.
I didn't really choose to climb in profession. It kind of just chose me. I really feel like I was initially, when I first started climbing, I was afraid of heights, and so I just decided never to look down, and then one thing led to another, and then I got to a point in my climbing where I wanted to climb all over the world.
Yes, I have noticed a change in the climate during the time I've been climbing. I had the luxury to work in the North Cascades, so I got to see and be right up close with the glaciers on a daily basis all throughout the summer. And over my short time, just 10 years of being up there, I did notice the glaciers definitely receding within that short period of time. So where we used to be able to go ice climb on these big seracs, the seracs had melted down. They had melted down to just about these little bumps, ice bumps, and they really became nothing.
Complex question to answer because we don't really know, because we're so, you know, our life on Earth is so short that it's hard to know. But what I have noticed is places that are closer to the equator, which are, you know, I used to guide a lot in Ecuador, and with big, massive glaciers and, you know, really healthy, and went back 7-8 years ago to guide there, and some of those really healthy glaciers were completely gone. So whether that's normal climate change or something specific there, who knows, but definitely seems like things like that are are changing. And it does seem like the weather patterns are more unpredictable. The norms are not, things are, outside the norm, for sure.
Just our glaciers as well have been constantly retreating. It's pretty incredible to see, especially being up there for 7 years. Every year, it moves back a little bit more, and then to compare it to where it used to be when I first started working, it's pretty unreal. And I'll tell clients, and I try and read clients. I'm not going to talk to the super conservative dude from Texas about climate change, because I do work on tips. But for the most part, I'll point out to my clients of like, oh, this is where the glacier was in 2010. This is where it was in 2011 and 2012, all the way up to the present day. Because I remember, the points of like where we originally walked off of the rock moraine and onto the glacier, and it's every year it moves back about 80 feet in like width, and then another 15 to 20 feet in height.
I've been on one expedition up in Canada, and it was pretty obvious. The first bolts, the historic first bolt on the walls were out of reach because the glacier had receded so much. They're 50 feet off the glacier level, whereas before you would just easily climb up, the snowpack and access those bolts. But I'd say that's the most glaring example where I saw like widespread like glacial melt.
As far as seeing climate change, I like to think that my time span's a little bit too short to see real change. But I can see the evidence of change, like, I can see that the glaciers are receding, and I've seen some of that, and that happens, but I can also see that, 100 years ago, say in the Khumbu Icefall or the Khumbu Glacier below our base camp, it's like the glacier's gotten way thinner, and you can see that just based on like glacial moraines and geologic evidence. But yeah, I don't know what I see, if it's fluctuations like that, it's just like a weird shift in the weather for this year, or is it going to get colder again?
Well, everybody knows that the permanent ice fields on the north face of the Eiger have disappeared. The top 33 feet of Mount Cook has fallen off. The ice curtain on the Diamond Couloir of Mount Kenya has fallen off. Their routes in Alaska, like the Middle Triple Peak, where pilots are hesitant to land there anymore because the glacier's receding. So there are routes that are difficult to get into anymore as well.
Last year we were in, one of the other students and then an alumni of the program and myself tried to climb Mount Cook. And even down there, Mount Cook, the tallest peak in New Zealand, lost the top 30 feet of its peak. It literally just collapsed down because what happened was the rock there is pretty poor quality. It's pretty chalky. It's held together because it's frozen. And it's been getting so warm that it literally melted and the mountain fell down.
I think a lot of it is just like going to places where there are some small glaciers in Colorado and knowing the history behind them or seeing them on maps and then actually going to that location and looking at them and seeing that they're just a small, like a postage stamp compared to a glacier that covered, several hundred acres is now down to like 5 or 6 acres of visible ice.
I think what has happened in Patagonia the last 10 years has been another example of the shift in weather patterns, at least. In the old days, when I first started going down there in the 90s, the amount of high-pressure days you got were tiny, and you did not have the forecasting technology that they have now. So you'd go down there for a month, or 2 months, or 3 months, and you would have two good days of weather, and now it's like climbing in the Sierras. People go down there, and the weather has definitely gotten better recently in terms of more days of high-pressure, warmer temps. My friend Jim Donini did the first ascent of Torrey Eiger down there in 1976, and they were down there for 90 days, and they got 6 days of climbing. I have an ex-girlfriend who just went down there the 1st of February, and they got 2 4-day high pressures already, and they have another one on right now, late February. In a month, they got 3 windows that were almost as long as what Tim got in 3 months' time 40 years ago.
One thing that I found pretty prevalent is the big glaciers. So I work in Washington in the Cascades, and the Cascades have the most glaciers in the lower 48, but at the same time, like, they're melting dramatically. Like, just working there, it's become increasingly dangerous due to rockfall. The volcanic rock in the Cascades, which is underneath the glaciers, is starting to become more open, and it's shedding dramatically in the last few years, way more than it has in the past. And it's causing a lot of close calls for us as guides and as well as our clients, and it's getting dangerous. And a lot of that's because there's just no ice on top that's keeping it kind of secure.
The interesting thing is, like, it's not just things get warmer, but weather patterns shift, and we don't really know what's going to happen with the weather. Like, could bring harsher weather storms, or we don't really know what we're playing with.
Yeah, live in a van. You realise that actually everyone's got way more stuff than they need. They waste so much stuff, and then as soon as you live in a van, you've got like a few meters squared. You've got to pack your whole life into it, and you just don't use as much stuff. So you're not my personal impact, I think, is a lot less. So although sure I live in a van and drive everywhere, but it's got a bike in it. So if I drive to a city, park it up and ride the bike.
Yeah.
And then just stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Just like making your life more simple. I lived in my truck all summer and tried to stay in one spot as much as I could, not drive it, and walk everywhere. Just like powering down on stuff. You realize, especially when you live out of your van, like how little you actually need to, not just survive, but like just be happy and not even worry about it. So.
Yeah, it's hard to do because we have to work, we got to travel. I mean, I have a pretty large carbon footprint as an IFMGA guide because I travel a lot.
Right.
But I think one of the byproducts of that is taking people that might not normally spend time in this environment and get them out to appreciate it. So hopefully I can affect a greater chunk of the population to appreciate what they have, snow, ice, and those things. And hopefully that'll filter out and help affect change over time.
Then by taking people out, it lets folks relate to the environment in a way that a lot of people don't. Folks who live in cities and don't leave to go recreate in the outdoors, I think they have a different relation with the world than, say, I do, who, I spend a lot of time outside and I enjoy it, and I feel a connection with the world that, I would hope it stays to be a nice, hospitable place for us and whatnot. But it'll be interesting. It'd be truly interesting to see if you could press the fast forward button, what does happen in like 100, 200, 500 years.
So I believe in the local movement is like transportation costs. It's just like building things and creating a community and supporting each other, as well as slow and steady, kind of like little by little affecting change in our daily lives. And I think whether it be your eating habits, your consumption, your consumerism, buying things, I think if each person kind of like takes a note out of that, and I think we can affect kind of larger change. And I try and do it. I don't buy a lot of things, and I try and sew all my own clothes and try not to waste. And I think that's like a huge part of it, is trying to not waste things.
See, that's a really tough question, because I totally recognize that humans are helping make climate change worse. And the worse climate change becomes, the worse the climates become. And I'm kind of a hypocrite on that. Like, I drive a truck, and I really like driving, and like this winter, there wasn't good ice out east, so I did one of the most unenvironmental things, which was I took a plane to Colorado, and I drove 10 hours to go to Wyoming. And for my work, I take a helicopter to a glacier. And so there's all these things that I do, and my carbon footprint's actually fair size. I think, however, though, I do spend a lot more time educating, and I think it's kind of a balance, particularly with my line of work, where I get to influence a lot of students and introduce them to climbing and make them realize that the environment is something they should care for. My selfishness causes me to want to go climbing instead of reducing my emissions and impact.
Well, I've always been a minimalist. I think it's helped me be successful in my career in climbing. And I've noticed that it's a good way to look at adapting to climate change, I think. So what it means is that we try to reduce, reuse, recycle. We want to save and try not to use up everything. Take it all and spend it for ourselves.
I work for myself. That's not totally true. I do several things. I design outdoor gear for other brands and build their prototypes. So I primarily focus on U.S. made goods or North American made goods. I've been to China enough to know that everything that's made over there is total junk show. The environmental standards are so low, it's appalling. So I look at that and I look, well, how do I want to build things? How do I think things should be made? I see gear that's 30 years old that's still intact because it was well made to begin with. Good gear equals less waste. And I also try to not build everything. I think we have too much choice in the U.S. Things are too cheap.
I have a highly energy efficient townhouse that's been converted from just a normal townhouse. There's a presentation on my website, kevindonovan.com, called From Townhouse to Greenhouse. And it's almost 100% LED lighting. There's 5 kilowatts of solar on there. There's a hybrid, high-efficiency electric hot water heater that runs off of the solar panels. I drive an electric car, and list goes on. There's so many little things.
I would be hypocritical if I said I'm doing the very best I could at that, because I'm cognizant of it, and I think we actually do a better job than we used to in that respect, in terms of the footprint sort of things. But I still get on planes and fly to India, so it's not like I'm not doing anything to contribute to the problem either. It all starts with the individual, obviously, and the overall impact is in fact going to be lessened if everybody chose to do things differently. But the reality is that 60 to 80% of the planet does not have the luxury that we have in this country or Western Europe to make those kinds of choices. At one point, not very long ago, 40% of the people on this planet had not even placed a phone call in their life. So there is that bigger picture aspect of what is going on in Asia, Africa, India, and all these places where there are billions of people that don't have the discretionary choice to make lifestyle changes. They're just trying to survive. So it is sort of elitist, in a sense, to believe that we in the Western world, especially in this country, can profess to be changing things so much when we are still the biggest consumers on the planet. We have the most impact per capita of any people in the world.
Yes, climbers have a huge impact on the areas that they're in. We all think that we're environmentalists. We all think we live simply. But at the same time, we're really guilty of each person driving to the crag, just to be here at separate times, leaving micro trash behind, making paths where paths weren't before. We have a huge impact on the climate or just the environment around us. And then at the same time, we're the first ones to point fingers at another user group that might be motor driven, just because we don't think that we make impact, but we think that they do. So we're usually the quickest to judge, I believe, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you go somewhere, you're going to have an impact, and you're going to leave a track or whatever. And climbers, sure, back in the day, the style was to go out and climb and leave your trash where you were, or bury it, or burn it, and I think climbers in general have changed a lot and are actually fairly conscious of leaving the wilderness spaces as much wilderness as they can be, and being pretty conscious of what they do.
Boy, if the climate continues to change, well, that'll be interesting, right? Because it won't just necessarily mean that one place will warm up and the whole place will warm up. It just means that the climate's going to change. Maybe some place that was always warm is now going to be cold. Some place that was always cold is now going to be much warmer. So I think that we will see a lot of change. Places that were we used to go all the time as reliable places, but we're going to be going away. But then a new area will now form for ice or mixed climbing because that climate change is happening.
So I think those in the bigger ranges, in the bigger mountains, there's still going to be plenty to be climbed. And they're also higher, closer to the poles, stuff like that. It's more the lower down stuff, like ice climbing in central New York, that we're going to struggle with in the future, and the seasons for that, it's going to be smaller and smaller. Like in Alaska, instead of going to the Ruth Gorge in mid-May, now you go in late April kind of thing. You just push it back, whereas ice climbing in the Northeast, like sometimes it just won't come in one winter. It's not like you could go earlier in the winter or, you know, earlier in the spring, something like that, to get good conditions. It just won't be there.
Well, I mean, we're all going to be climbing a lot more in Canada. Maybe not.
Yeah.
We don't know how things are really going to change.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know what the weather's going to be like in Montana. I mean, Montana could have warm winters. You know, New England could get colder. But I also think what's going to happen as climate change, as if it does worsen and gets worse, activities like ice climbing and mountain and things like that are just kind of going to go by the wayside because life's going to be too difficult. I hate to be the joy kill, but I mean, you know, if there's major disruptions with food supply, access to electricity, heating, transportation, medical supplies, I mean, everything's going to change, you know, as more and more of the world gets displaced. But I think we look at it, you know, from the U.S. point of view, but if you take the global view, it's going to get worse.
Climate change is not just about polar bears not having habitat. I mean, this hits me closer to home, but you know, it's also not just about me not being able to climb my alpine routes, because the effects are more far-reaching, and the greatest effects are in the Himalayas, because the mightiest river systems in the world, the 5 greatest river systems in the world, flow out of the glaciers, and in the short term, the rivers will swell, but in the long term, as the glaciers recede, those rivers are gonna they'll dwindle. And the problem is that those rivers are used for irrigation that's used to feed billions of people downstream.
I think the good thing to remember is we can change this. We don't have to go that route. Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, I'm hopeful that we actually see that at some point. And yeah, things are going to be different. I mean, people don't like change in general, I think. I mean, I think now that I'm getting older, now that I'm in my 40s, you know, I'm less resistant to change than I was when I was 25. 25, I was still living in my van. I was still a climbing bum. Younger people, certainly the millennials, see a much different view of the world, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
So... And, you know, you can always take the old punk ethos, too, and just do it yourself. You know.
It's true.
That's kind of been my motto.
Yeah.
People your parents' generation and older have a responsibility to step up. Everybody does. But I think, you know, we have more opportunity to contribute than someone who's in school and in the workplace. We may not have that much extra money, but if we have the time and the interests, just like climbing, the one thing that is most important of anything is passions. So if you are passionate about something, you will figure out how to be a part of it.
I think that climbers may get it sooner than others because we're noticing it. I mean, we're kind of like a canary in a coal mine, you know. I mean, we see the effects of climate change firsthand. I think that people around others are starting to notice, and then the effects of, you know, just extreme floods, droughts, wildfires, temperature increases, etc. But I think climbers are noticing it first. And the thing is that I think that climate change is kind of like cancer. I mean, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but you know, a lot of times you don't know you have cancer until you're in stage 4. And I think the same thing may happen with climate change.
Looking at the climbing community, I see a group of environmental activists that are extremely underutilized. The interviews left me with questions like, how can we, as climbers, be more involved in environmental activism? How can we practice conservation on a larger level? I think that the first step is for climbers to be more introspective. We need to see the ways in which we are hypocritical, like being upset about glaciers melting, yet flying helicopters to climb on them. We need to make sacrifices, and I hope these sacrifices don't occur too late. Climbers, as a powerfully connected community of people, can go a long way to do some good. I want climbers to harness some of the energy they have toward climbing into a fruitful and productive movement against climate change, inspiring other groups to do the same.
Go faster. Here we go. Oh my god. Just headbutt that pillar, dude.
Yeah, watch your face.
Or like, lick it.
I'm on a European work avoidance program, so I'm trying to do as little as possible.
It's a really effective program.